Hello and welcome to episode 27 of series 2 of the Engaging Internal Comms podcast. This is the show for employee engagers and internal communicators who like to keep up to date with all that is new in our profession. My name's Craig Smith from the Big Picture People. Thank you to everyone who's been getting in touch and giving us some feedback on the show. We've been listening to that, and we're looking at getting some new guests lined up for you to address some of the topics that you've been asking for. I'll mention a couple of those in a moment. Just first of all, just want to make you aware of an event that we are running, a free event that the Big Picture People are running on the 3rd of November. That's the 3rd of November 2021, just in case you're listening to this at some time in the future. It's at 3 o'clock in the afternoon UK time, so 1500 hours, and that is a webinar that we're running. It's a free webinar. It's called Helping Your Employees Understand Your Organization's Big Picture. So one of the things that we found is that most business leaders sometimes have trouble explaining their organization's mission, vision and values to their employees, and that's really important at the moment, particularly as we're starting to come out of the pandemic, that we start to reconnect our people to that overall bigger picture of what the organization is all about and still all about, regardless of what everyone has been through. And so what we tend to find is that these leaders are sometimes a bit too close to the detail. The information is quite complex and difficult to articulate. But as we all know, if employees understand that bigger picture, they're much more likely to feel connected to the organization and to be able to deliver better results. So we're going to be looking at this issue in the webinar. We're going to be looking at why this is an issue for leaders. What are some of the things that they find difficult to communicate, and why is it that is the case? But we'll also be sharing with you a few simple but powerful techniques that can help your leaders to get those complex messages across in an engaging and sustainable way. So that's on our website. If you go to thebigpicturepeople.co.uk, go to events, you will find a link on the events page for the event on the 3rd of November. You can get some more information, or you can book now. It's a Zoom webinar. As I said, it's completely free. You can sign up via the website, and that will take you to Zoom, where you can register your interest there, and we'll keep in touch with you and let you know the details. You'll get the details that will come through immediately with the sign-in details for the webinar itself. So just coming up in the next episode on the 26th of October, I've got an interview with Brian Landau from a company called Venly, and again, we're going to be coming back to a topic we've covered a couple of times already in this series, but from a slightly different angle, which is how we can use audio in internal communications and the value of audio in internal communications. Often gets overlooked when we're thinking of internal comms. We tend to think of written, or we tend to think of video, but audio has a massive role to play, as Brian will be telling us about the work that he's been doing in that area with his company as well. And then coming up in future episodes, we're going to be covering a couple of areas that people have been asking for, which is we're going to be looking at the role of change management in internal comms and the connection between change management and internal communications. Often internal communicators think their role is just about broadcasting sometimes, and I think we can often fall into that trap. And I think there's a key role that we play in change and transformation within the organisation that we'll be looking at in that episode, which will be coming up, as I said, towards the end of series 2, which we'll make a decision on how many episodes we're going to have in series 2 shortly and let you know all about that. So finally, just before I lead into today's interview, please, if you haven't done so already, please leave us a review on iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcast, if that is available to be able to do that. Really helps us in terms of boosting our availability to be seen by other people who are interested in our profession, and it just helps us with visibility, and also to help us to get more and more fantastic guests for you to be able to listen to and learn from. So on that note, I will pass over to today's guest. In previous episodes, we've talked about some of the lessons that have come from the pandemic of 2020-2021. and looked at them in the context of the episodes that we've been covering them in, but we've not actually covered it in a specific episode where we've looked at what are some of the major IC learnings, internal comms and employee engagement lessons that we can take from the pandemic, but most importantly, how can we apply them to our practice going forward. So that's what I wanted to do in this episode, was to dedicate some time to actually look at what are some of the key lessons that we can take. And to do that, I wanted to speak to someone who was very experienced in internal communications and also someone who has an ambassadorial role as well within the IC community in order to bring on and develop new talent within our profession. So that was what I wanted to cover off today. What were some of the key lessons from the pandemic that we can apply going forward? And there are 6 key lessons that my guest today is going to walk us through, and ultimately concluding around how we in IC maintain our value and importance going forward, which again is a recurring theme that we've heard in previous episodes as well. So, on to today's interview. Kirsty Bowen is a high-performing internal communications leader with significant experience of shaping the IC agenda at organisations such as RICS, OCR and Coventry Building Society, where Kirsty is currently Senior Internal Comms Manager. Kirsty is also has an influential role at the IoIC, where she is a board director and also an I Chose IC ambassador. So hello, Kirsty, how are you?
I'm really good, thank you.
Fantastic. And whereabouts in the world are you, just for our listeners, so we can geographically position you?
I live in rural Northamptonshire, where I've been since just April. We just moved in April.
Okie doke, excellent. So not a million miles away from Coventry, but yeah, not immediately next to Coventry, but you're at the Coventry Building Society at the moment. So yeah, okay. And so, would you like to tell us a little bit more about your role at Coventry Building Society, and also a little bit more about this I Chose IC ambassador role that you've got at IoIC?
Yeah, definitely. So I've been at Coventry Building Society for nearly 8 years now. Second biggest building society in the UK. If you don't know us, go and look us up. I've been building and leading the colleague comms team during that time. So at the society, we work on everything from communicating strategy and change to helping people stay connected and having conversations across our channels. So having been there 8 years, I can say with confidence it is a really good place to work. And as you mentioned, I also volunteer with the IoIC too. So the I Chose IC Ambassador campaign is really about building a skilled profession in the future by showing students and those that support them that internal comms is a really rewarding career. So I've spoken at some careers events already, and other ambassadors might mentor students or promote internal comms at different types of events. So basically, it's a really good way to reach students at a time when they're making decisions about their future.
Yeah, and I guess that all boils down to the fact that, I mean, I know we've spoken about this on a number of episodes of the show, of that the IC is not always an obvious career choice, is it, for people leaving university or school, and I think to make it clear that there is this job called internal communications is really important.
Yeah, and it's a fantastic job as well. So yeah, definitely, it's an important volunteering role to have.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, so when we spoke about what we were going to talk about on the show, you had some really, I think, some really interesting lessons that you've taken from the pandemic, and I know we've covered this before on the show, but not in specifically looking at it from what have we specifically learned from the pandemic. We've looked at how has it influenced different aspects of IC, but I think just spending some time really understanding what you've taken from it as a professional working in IC, and how that's going to shape the profession going forward, particularly again given your role as an I Chose IC ambassador, I think is really, really important. So this is what we're going to explore with you, and we've got a little list in front of us here that you'd kind of rattled off when we spoke before. So what I'd quite like to do, just before we dive into the details of each of those, do you want to just give us a quick overview of how the pandemic affected Coventry Building Society, its employees, customers, stakeholders, etc.?
Yeah, of course. I mean, like everybody, we found ourselves having to move really quickly, thinking on our feet, from an internal comms point of view as well, of course, reassuring colleagues and keeping them informed. And those first stages of the pandemic were pretty crazy. Obviously, people's lives were impacted, their families' lives were impacted. And we've got quite a role to play in that, really, whether it's supporting our colleagues or supporting our customers, like you say. And working in financial services, we had to work hard to keep our branches open and keep our telephone lines open because, of course, people still need access to their money and their finances. So we found that first stage was really full on, reactive, complex because of how the constant changes were affecting different people in different ways. And from our point of view, for head office colleagues, we needed to get them up and running from home. Our branch network never stopped supporting the members face to face. And then as the pandemic progressed, I guess we could become more proactive and we could focus on colleagues' well-being, including our own teams, by the way, because we were working frantically. And we had to work really hard to keep up that sense of connection then and community across the society. And there's absolutely no doubt that we've all learned loads during this time and have a lot of things to put into practice going forwards.
Yeah, excellent. And that leads us nicely onto what we're going to talk about next. And I guess the context around this is what are some of the things that you've learned, not just, hopefully, well, touch wood anyway, that once this pandemic is over, we won't have to deal with anything of a similar magnitude in the foreseeable future anyway, maybe not. But I guess what are you going to carry forward that you're going to continue to use in your practice going forward? That some of the, as you say, some of those lessons coming out of the pandemic. So if we can maybe just pick those off in turn, then I've got 1, 2, 3. I've got 6 on my list here, and feel free to add any more, Kirsty, that come into your mind. But the first one you'd mentioned when we spoke was that the fact that we're all human, we have our own needs and sensitivities, and we need to be treated as individuals, and our comms need to recognise that. So do you just want to expand a little bit more on that, please?
Yeah, I think sometimes in internal comms, especially when you're having to work at speed, we sort of go for the broad brush approach and we try and touch everyone with the one communication. But when you're working in a complex organisation, this absolutely doesn't work. And especially with something as sensitive as the pandemic, everyone experienced it in completely different ways, both personally and professionally. And I've got a good example really of where we got it wrong because we didn't target a communication. So I mentioned earlier that our branch network had to keep going through the pandemic. They were serving customers every day. But obviously lots of our employees were having to work from home for the first time because they were in a head office role. So they were juggling homeschooling and all sorts of other responsibilities whilst trying to work at the same time. And we wanted to give people ideas of things they could do during the lockdown when we were feeling really restricted. And so we tried to put together a nice piece to try and keep everyone's spirits up. But I think we were a little bit misguided. We didn't think to target it, and we hadn't quite understood how under pressure and vulnerable actually those colleagues in the branch network were feeling when they had to go into that face-to-face environment every day when we were all being told how dangerous that could be. So I think that's a good example of where we'd put this out to everybody, but actually an upbeat piece really wasn't what they needed at that moment in time. No. So, of course, we don't always get it right, but that situation has definitely made us think and make sure that we are really hot on our targeting now, whether it's throughout the pandemic still or even going forward, because people are working in very different situations. They have different emotions, different anxieties. And even now with fixed rules around masks or distancing being removed, it's still important to remember that lots of people still feel anxious. And we need to be respectful to everyone. And of course, that needs to be reflected through our comms. So that's a great lesson to take forward.
Yeah, no, it is. I think it is. I think that I heard a lot of people talking at the beginning of the pandemic about certain, not necessarily internal comms, but I guess some of the external comms and the way that companies were still continuing to market themselves. I mean, I saw adverts, with kind of advertising products that were being, the advert was with loads of people kind of partying, and you kind of think, that's really tone deaf really at the moment, pumping out that sort of marketing campaigns when it's something that we just can't do, and like actually has the opposite effect to, I'm sure, what the desired effect was in the first place. So as a good lesson to carry forward is that empathy and listening to the tone of the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I guess linked to that, the second one, which is about authentic human leadership, has arisen and should be maintained. Seeing leaders as humans too is vital for connection. So it's kind of related, but slightly different. So do you want to say a little bit more about that one?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it absolutely links back to seeing everyone as individuals. So leaders are individuals too. And I think it's been really important for them to acknowledge how they've been feeling and how their lives have been impacted by the pandemic when they've been talking to teams or to other colleagues. And this sort of thing is hugely vital in terms of being relatable and building connections. And I think in a strange way, it sort of helps other people across the organisation feel that they've got permission almost to be having a hard time too, because they can see that the leaders are. And I think we know that storytelling is a really important tool for communicators. So for leaders to bring in their own personal experiences into a blog or a Zoom conversation or a video, whatever it might be, it's a really good way to emotionally connect with the audience. And again, I've got an example on a webinar that we were hosting. One of our executive team did actually get emotional online talking about how the pandemic had affected their children. And we got a huge amount of positive feedback and support from just that small moment.
Yeah, I think that humanity and level. No, I'm not going to use that term. No, I'm not going to use the term. I nearly came out of my mouth without thinking about it. But the kind of equalization that we're all kind of going through similar experiences, regardless of where we fit into the hierarchy, I think is really important. And I think, yeah, I agree with you. I think that's been a positive consequence, which is to recognize that we're actually having very similar experiences, regardless of we've just got different jobs and different responsibilities. But we're all kind of going through similar emotions and experiences throughout this. I think that's definitely something that's worth continuing going forward.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I guess the third one has definitely become much more. I think I've sensed over the last 18 months even before it, people were talking about mental health and well-being, but I think even more so now that it has come a common currency. But the point is, mental health and well-being must be led by the organisation and the employer. Do you want to just say a little bit more about that, please?
Yeah, and again, I think you're right. We were starting to see some really good work on this pre-pandemic as well. But the understanding around mental health and well-being has completely skyrocketed over the last 16 months or so. And we've all been forced into more isolating, restrictive and sort of really challenging situation. And there's just no shying away from the fact that organisations should be supporting colleagues more, working to reduce stigmas and encouraging people to talk about mental health issues. So I think it's really important in building a more open and inclusive culture across your organisation. So I guess as comms professionals, what can we do? We can help to signpost support, we can share stories, and we can absolutely make sure there are enough ways for people to talk and be listened to. And I think we can support managers too, and we should support managers so that they can feel more confident and equipped to have conversations around sensitive issues like mental health. And it's really vital that organisations keep their focus on this going forwards. I do think that we have a huge responsibility to our employees, and we're in a good position as an organisation to make sure that support's available and to listen to people or see when something's wrong or someone's behaviour might have changed. So I don't think our responsibility should be underestimated.
Yeah, very good point. Very good point. And I guess these all really connect really well together. So the fourth one is contact with line managers and team dynamics are vital, especially for new starters. I think that links in with partly the mental health, but I guess there's something else. There's more to that than just mental health and well-being, although that's really important. Do you want to say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think it's about belonging, really. So, before the pandemic hit, we were spending hours and hours with each other. And all of a sudden we went to a lot of us just sitting on our own day after day. And I don't know about others, but it certainly took Coventry Building Society a little while to get going with Zoom when the pandemic first hit. So we weren't even seeing anyone's faces for a good month or so. We just had phone calls. And we know how important it is for engagement to have a good relationship with your line manager and to feel a valued member of a team. So we've all worked really hard to keep that up since March 2020. And I've seen some great examples of teams who've had Zoom breakfasts together or hosted team quizzes or had online socials. And we also launched Yammer this year too. So teams have been making the most of having that platform through which to connect. But in terms of new starters, I think it's been really difficult. And we've welcomed a lot of people to the society who've never been into one of our offices and met their colleagues face to face. And it's just so hard to build relationships in the same way over Zoom or on the phone. You can't ask quick questions over the desk, or you don't have the same time to ask what someone's weekend plans are or to get to know them as people. And I've seen some new starters get on brilliantly, but for those who are a bit more shy, or that they might even be struggling in general because of the pandemic, it's been really difficult. And I think it shows the power of having a strong team dynamic to keep people connected and also getting to know your colleagues outside of a work context. And I think we need to carry this on now into the more hybrid way of working, because it still might be really rare going forward for a team to be in the office at the same time. Just depends on how your organisation's going to operate in the new world. So it's worth remembering to work hard on keeping up that team dynamic and to help people joining your team to feel connected and a real part of things.
Yeah, I really hope organisations you really kind of prioritise the value of if they are going to go down the hybrid route of when we do get people into the office, that we don't just then get them to do jobs that they could have actually easily done at home, that we actually realize that time is precious, and that collaboration and connecting and team dynamics are what we should be getting people together for if they're spending a lot of time working in a kind of solitary way at home. I think that's my thoughts. Is that similar to yours?
Yeah, definitely. So we're just at the start of our hybrid working journey, as everyone is, I guess, and we're very much doing it on a team-led approach. So it will be largely up to the individual, but obviously depends on what you've got in your diary on any given day or what tasks you've got to do. But we hope that people can still very much balance their home and work lives. And obviously there's no point coming into the office if you're just going to be sat on Zoom meetings all day. That's something actually you're better doing from home. So really come into the office when you feel you can collaborate with people, work together on something, and really make the most of it, like you say.
Yeah. And again, the next point flows on quite nicely, which is an interesting one. I think remote hybrid meeting etiquette will be important for supporting effective collaboration. So tell us a little bit more about that, because I think we've actually, there's been good and bad through kind of Zoom. I think it has taught us some certain etiquettes that we should really kind of carry into the real world as well. But I also think there's been some bad habits as well. So, I mean, what are your thoughts on that, Kirsty?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. I guess before we were very used to face-to-face meetings where we can read people's body language. We can sort of see where we can interject into a conversation. Now we've gone the other way. We're used to virtual meetings, and you've got the function to put your hand up or use the chat box if you want to say something, but you can't quite get into the flow of the conversation. I think hybrid meetings are going to be really, really interesting. So where I am, we've got something that we call Zoom in a room, because we like a rhyme, who doesn't? And so we can have people zooming in on one big screen in the meeting room, and they're just seeing one video of our actual room with people sat around the table. And it's a little bit strange, because actually if you're physically in the room, you're quite far away from the camera. It's not like normal Zoom where you're up close and personal. So you've got to think about, if you're in the room and talking to someone else in the room, do you look at them, or are you looking at the Zoom screen so that you're looking at everyone? Or how do we make sure people in the room aren't prioritized over those on the Zoom screen? People just aren't going to be on an equal footing in terms of their physical presence. So I think we need to chair these sorts of meetings really well. We need to make sure we're being inclusive, which I think, I'm not sure whether that's happened more or less actually on a Zoom meeting, but it doesn't always work well in a face-to-face meeting. But I think we've definitely got to watch whose voices are being heard, whose voices aren't being heard, and make sure everyone gets the chance to speak, whether they're in the room or on the Zoom screen. And maybe putting in just a bit more preparation beforehand if you want people to work together in small groups, or you're looking for a lot of interaction. And really basic things as well, like making sure your equipment in the actual room is good enough so that those people on the Zoom can hear well enough, for example, to contribute. Screen sharing, or making sure you circulate documents in advance. It's just really making sure that we're going to get the most out of the collaboration opportunities, I guess, that come our way, and not forgetting the poor people on the end of the Zoom who can't get a word in edgeways or are being, just forgotten in some way. So it's going to be a really new way of working, I think, and we almost need a new code of etiquette to get through it and make sure that everyone feels included.
Yeah, it's kind of like a microcosm, isn't it, for the whole, in the office, out of the office dynamic, isn't it? Is making sure that everything is inclusive and nobody feels as though it's kind of a two-tier system, and the kind of meetings is the sort of focal point of that, I guess, to a certain extent.
This is it. And like you said, against the last point, I guess, making sure that you're coming into the office for a really good reason, not just because you feel if you're not there you're going to be left out. People, we all really need to learn a bit more about hybrid meeting etiquette and how it's going to work well for everyone.
I saw some, I won't mention the name of the company, but you can probably work it out. It's a very, very famous IT company who are planning, or software company who are planning they had some new technology, which is basically one wall of your meeting room is like all the people who are dialing in, they're kind of silhouetted and on the wall. So it's almost like they're sat around the table as well. Really, really. So when you actually address the person, across the table, and they can see you looking at them, it was really interesting. I think it'll need quite a significant investment, I think, in a lot of the meeting rooms, but it was basically to sort of almost level up the kind of meeting environment where you've got everybody feels as though they're sat around the table, whether they're physically there or whether they're dialing in, which looks quite interesting.
Sounds fantastic. But maybe people do need to look at what investment they need to put into technology in the coming years. I mean, we always invest heavily in things that will impact on customers, for example, but do organizations invest enough to make sure that people inside the organization are getting the best experience? So maybe that's another lesson from the pandemic. We need to invest more in internal systems.
Yes, definitely. And then the final point, which I spoke a couple of weeks ago with Lisa Gwinnell on the podcast about, which was the whole how do we get a place at the table and maintain a place at the table. And I think it's always worth reiterating that. I think the final point for you on your list of things from the coming out of the pandemic is the value of IC and maintaining its momentum and importance going forward. That it isn't, people don't kind of get distracted by other things and forget actually how critical IC was to the business and how much we've realized that now. So do you want to add a little bit more to that, please, Kirsty?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's been such a turning point for internal comms, hasn't it? And in essence, it's been the most awful thing that we've been through in our lifetime. But for our profession, it's really sort of boosted the value that organisations recognise we can bring. They've seen how important it is not only to get those broadcast messages out there quickly, which we all had to do, but also the importance of connecting people and to really think about how to communicate and when and with who. And the huge value, I think, in involving an internal comms expert early to gain input at a strategic level, really, rather than just, get this out, fire this through, that sort of thing. We can really input at that strategic level. So I think we knew how much value we could add, and we were really working hard to get the seat at the table and to communicate that and influence our organisations. But I think the pandemic has fast forwarded leaders' perspective on it now too. And that's something we just can't let go. We need to keep on driving forward the profession and its importance on engagement or strategy development and ultimately, an organisation's success. So I think it's definitely our time. And in turn, I guess to link back up with the beginning as well, it links back nicely and supports the I Chose IC campaign that we talked about earlier.
Fantastic. Yeah, definitely. No, I think absolutely. I think that's it's a good point to kind of conclude on, I think. And then it kind of all of those lessons, the previous 5 lessons, are kind of embodied in that, aren't they? That it's not just about broadcasting. It's integral to the well-being, to the kind of the way we manage people, the way we engage people, and the way we kind of help them feel connected and that sense of belonging with the organization, which is vitally critical. So fantastic. So any kind of final thoughts and lessons or anything that we've not already covered that, kind of pearls of wisdom from you, Kirsty, that you take out of the pandemic that we've not already covered in any of the points that we've already covered off?
Oh God, I feel under pressure for a pearl of wisdom now.
Sorry.
No, that's all right. That's all right. I mean, we're always constantly learning in our profession. I think we've got a very sort of great learning mindset, if you like. So I guess my pearl of wisdom would just be, let's make sure that rather than just say we're going to learn these lessons, actually put them into practice and help our teams to learn them and take things forward as well, so that we can make work lives better for everyone and help improve engagement and help people feel like they have a purpose and they can contribute, and really that they can belong to the organisation they're with. So we've got plenty to do, and let's make sure that we crack on and help make work lives better for everyone.
Fantastic. Yeah, definitely here to that as well. So wonderful. Well, thank you very much for that, Kirsty. Just before we wrap up, I think I pre-warned you. I hope I pre-warned you that I normally ask my interviewees a question at the end, which is just a little bit about something that even people who work with you quite closely or know you well from either on a professional or even a personal basis maybe don't know about you. So what have you got a kind of little secret that you're willing to share with us on the interview, Kirsty?
Yeah, I'm not sure what this is going to do for my credibility. You said it could be personal or professional, so I've gone for personal. And I think this is incredible, but maybe it's not. I have never in my life fried an egg.
Really?
Really?
Wow.
That is the truth. Never fried an egg. So just to give you the context, I don't do any cooking whatsoever. My husband's a brilliant cook and he enjoys cooking. But even when I lived on my own or I was at uni or whatever it was, I have never fried an egg.
Well, you're missing out on a real life experience there, Kirsty. I must admit, you must break your duck at some point.
Maybe I'll do it tonight. Maybe I'll go for it.
No. Honestly, it's not all it's made out. I was going to make a joke there about it's not all it's cracked up to be. But yeah, terrible, isn't it? But no. Well, I can't remember I'm going back now, and apologies if the guest is listening to this and can't remember. I did have a guest who was didn't like peeling small potatoes. Was his kind of a guilty secret. So there you go. You see, maybe I should put you guys in touch with each other, and there's a sort of common sort of novelty food sort of stories there that we could connect together and maybe get a little.
I bet we're both great at eating though.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Different skill set altogether there.
Definitely.
Oh, brilliant. Well, that's definitely a memorable example. As I think they never fried an egg before, but I definitely, boiled an egg. Have you ever boiled an egg?
I think I have boiled an egg, yes, but definitely never fried. I'm not sure I've done scrambled, to be honest.
And were you a student at some point?
Yes.
How did you cope?
Well, I used to buy things like frozen waffles, and I survived on those.
Oh, goodness. Yeah, I mean, actually thinking about it, I don't think I very fried many eggs. I think it was all kind of pot noodles and that sort of thing. But yeah. Well, look, that's brilliant. That's a fantastic sort of thing to finish on, Kirsty. Just in terms of anyone wanting to reach out to you, because obviously your ambassadorial role with IoIC, we'll put your LinkedIn URL in the show notes, if that's okay, on the website. So if anyone would like to contact you that way, is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely. Please do get in touch.
Fab. And you can choose to respond or otherwise if people do get in touch with you, but we'll stick that into the show notes. Well, all that remains for me to say is to say thank you very much, Kirsty. I really appreciate, on behalf of the people listening, your insights and your wisdom there, and I think some really, really powerful messages that we can all learn from. And probably, I think often with this sort of thing, it's useful to have validated your own conclusions from an experience like this, and I'm sure some of the things you've talked about people have kind of recognized as well in their own work, but I think it's always good to have someone with your experience and track record to be able to say yes, that is something that we've recognized that we need to kind of continue to follow through, and some of those learnings were really, really powerful. So thank you very much, Kirsty. Really appreciate that.
No problem. Thank you.
Take care. So, thank you for listening to Engaging Internal Comms. Hope you found this episode useful. We'd love to get your feedback and thoughts about the show. So, and also any questions or ideas that you've got for things you'd like us to cover in future episodes. So you can email us at info@thebigpicturepeople.co.uk, or you can get in touch with us via the contact form on our website, which is engagingic.com. Also, you'll be able to sign up for our mailing list there, and we'll send you relevant news about the show, new episodes, and also anything that we think you might be interested when it comes to internal communications or employee engagement. If you like the show and you haven't already done so, please subscribe to it via your podcast service. And also you can subscribe to it via the links on our podcast page, which again is engagingic.com. If you know anyone else who might be interested in the show, please distribute it to them. Please let them know about it. We want to try and grow a community of people here who are contributing to the show, giving us new ideas for episodes and things that you'd like to cover in future. So thank you very much.